Hey everyone, tonight we dive into the wonderfully chaotic realm of the ancient Greek gods, a pantheon bursting with power, drama, and deeply unstable emotions. Before we get started, take a second to like this video, and subscribe if you genuinely enjoy the content here. Also, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and what time it is where you are. It's always amazing to see our global audience connecting from all corners of the world. Now, get comfy. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for some gentle white noise, and let's settle in together for the evening story. Let's kick things off with the big boss himself, Zeus. He's the god of the sky, ruler of Mount Olympus, and the literal embodiment of how absolute power can completely scramble your sense of limits. Zeus was the youngest son of the Titans Cronus and Rhea. Now, Cronus was notorious for swallowing his children whole to avoid being overthrown. Yes, the classic bite the hand that could replace you tactic. Luckily, Rhea outsmarted him, saving baby Zeus by disguising a rock in a blanket for Cronus to swallow, which says a lot about how distracted or maybe gullible Cronus was. When Zeus grew up, he didn't just sit back. He led a full-on divine rebellion against his father. He literally sliced open Cronus' stomach, Freudians, brace yourselves, and freed his siblings, Poseidon, Hades, Hera, Hestia, and Demeter. And just like that, the universe's first dysfunctional family was in full effect. After the gods defeated the Titans in a brutal war, Zeus rose to the top as king of the gods. He gained control over the heavens, wielded thunder and lightning, and was supposed to be the guardian of cosmic order, justice, and sacred oaths. But in practice, Zeus' reign was anything but orderly. When he wasn't busy hurling bolts of lightning, his time was mostly spent shape-shifting into all kinds of animals, swans, bulls, eagles, or becoming golden mist to seduce anyone who caught his eye. The man had zero chill and no consistent moral compass. Imagine your Supreme Court justice suddenly turning into a goose just to flirt with a civilian. That's Zeus, but amped up with lightning and ego. Zeus' love life was an open-source disaster. He married his sister, Hera, which unsurprisingly turned out pretty badly. Besides Hera, Zeus had countless affairs with goddesses, nymphs, mortals, and likely even a few plants thrown in for good measure. This resulted in a massive number of demigod children, many of whom struggled with serious parental abandonment issues, and some ironically ended up founding entire mythologies of their own. Despite all the chaos, Zeus wasn't entirely reckless or without purpose. When he wasn't caught cheating or throwing thunderbolts at mortals who forgot to make the right offerings, he did serve as the cosmic referee. He enforced oaths, upheld law and order, and occasionally punished humans who showed more arrogance than he did, a challenging feat considering Zeus's own ego. Zeus was a figure both revered and feared, constantly stirring up PR nightmares for Olympus. He wielded immense power, commanded presence, and had zero respect for personal boundaries. He was protector and predator, judge and jester, a divine paradox embodied. On to Hera, technically the goddess of marriage, family, and childbirth, which is hilariously ironic given that her own marriage was a complete wreck, like a burning dumpster on wheels but dressed in gold. She was Zeus's wife, and also his sister, because, well, that's just how mythology rolls. Their wedding was intended as the golden standard for sacred unions, but as you'd expect, things didn't exactly unfold that way. Let's delve into a tale that's less myth and more of a never-ending soap opera, packed with betrayal, vengeance, and a dizzying array of characters transformed into animals, trees, or even stone. At the center of this drama is Hera, the mighty and unchallenged queen of the gods. Her power, however, doesn't manifest as straightforward strength, but rather through a very particular and fierce form, relentless vengeance. But don't be mistaken, her wrath isn't aimed at Zeus directly. That would be too predictable. Instead, Hera channels her fury toward the countless women Zeus pursues, often through seduction or outright kidnapping, and their unfortunate offspring. To give you a sense of her wrath, she once transformed a woman into a cow, cast a curse that doomed another to communicate only through echoes, and in one of her most infamous acts, sent serpents to kill the infant Hercules. That baby was undeniably Zeus's child, but not hers. The tangled family tree? Anyone? Considering her role as the goddess of marriage, it's understandable why Hera would find her husband's escapades frustrating, especially when Zeus continuously invented new, often animalistic, ways to woo or abduct women. Yet in the absence of ancient Greek therapy options, her way of coping took a darker turn. Eternal curses and elaborate punishments became her signature moves. Nevertheless, Hera wasn't solely a vindictive deity. She safeguarded women during childbirth, championed the sanctity of marriage in principle, and enforced oaths taken by mortals. Her presence was institutionalized with temples, priests, and devoted worshippers. Cities like Argos and Samos revered her as a powerful entity responsible for maintaining divine order. Simply put, Hera was the goddess you prayed to when your husband remained faithful, and the one who might send plagues upon those unfaithful ones. She embodies a fascinating paradox, a figure representing female dignity and strength within a system designed to diminish her. Hera's narrative is not merely one of jealousy, but of a woman tasked with symbolizing unity, all the while holding the foundations of Olympus together through an unyielding mixture of spite and passionate fury. Shifting gears, let's explore Poseidon, the formidable god of the sea, earthquakes, storms, and intriguingly horses, because nothing quite screams ocean ruler like a herd of wild stallions, at least in the mythology realm. As one of the three principal brothers dividing the cosmos, Zeus ruled the sky, Hades the underworld, and Poseidon claimed the watery domains, a prize he quite happily accepted. Poseidon's dominion spanned the vast oceans, where he commanded a menagerie of sea creatures, sometimes majestic, other times downright terrifying. His weapon of choice was a trident, not merely a sharp fork, but a divine three-pronged instrument, brimming with fury capable of leveling entire cities. Approached with a mix of reverence and fear, sailors sought his protection for safe voyages. Fishermen offered sacrifices to appease him, and city planners begged his blessing before settling near the shoreline, wary that their homes wouldn't be swallowed by the sea. Yet, Poseidon's mood swings were legendary. He was the unpredictable uncle within the pantheon, alternating between generosity and destruction. One moment he might sculpt new islands, and the next, unleash floods that ruin crops because someone forgot to thank him during a goat sacrifice. Once, in a fit of petty rage after losing a city naming contest to Athena, he struck the earth so hard with his trident that it triggered an earthquake. His wrath wasn't just formidable. It was a tempest of unpredictability and raw emotion, as turbulent as the seas he ruled. Poseidon, the mighty god of the sea, is known for more than just his tempestuous nature. Once, he offered the city of Athens a gift, a saltwater spring. In response, the Athenians chose instead an olive tree, a symbol of peace and prosperity. This choice sparked Poseidon's infamous sense of vengeance, a defining trait that captures his complex character. But beyond his storms and wrath, Poseidon's life was a tangled web of dramatic affairs. He sired children with nymphs, mortals, and even encountered the tragic Medusa, an incident that transformed her into the snake-haired monster we all know, while Poseidon walked away unscathed. Classic, mythological drama. Yet, Poseidon was not merely a wild force of nature. He was also a guardian of sailors and an architect of cities. In his calmer moments, he embodied fertility and prosperity, playing a vital role in the lives of the ancient Greeks who depended on the sea for survival. Like the ocean's shifting tides, however, Poseidon's temper could turn violently, reminding mortals who truly ruled the waves. Then there's Hades, the god of the underworld, a realm unlike the fiery Christian hell, but a vast, shadowy domain where souls linger for eternity. Contrary to many modern misconceptions, Hades wasn't an evil figure nor cruel in nature. Instead, he was a weary administrator of the afterlife. While Zeus governed the sky and Poseidon the seas, Hades ended up managing what might be called the ancient Greek afterlife's customer service department, an eternal task involving souls checking in and out for eternity amid gloom and souls' laments. His rule over the underworld was quiet and authoritative, without flashy displays or dramatic outbursts like lightning strikes or divine feuds. He simply did his job, ensuring no souls escaped and maintaining order with stoic resolve. The underworld itself, also named Hades, was divided into distinct parts: the heroic Elysium for the blessed, the nondescript Asphodel for ordinary souls, and the dreaded Tartarus, a place of eternal punishment, akin to a severe detention cell. Overseeing all these realms was the steadfast Hades, perhaps the ultimate middle manager of mythology. A controversial aspect of Hades' story involves Persephone, whom he abducted, a troubling act by today's standards. Yet, in true Greek mythological fashion marked by contradictions, they forged a strangely stable and functional marriage. Half the year she dwelled in the underworld, bringing vitality even to that shadowy place, and the other half back on Earth, signaling the arrival of spring. Their relationship might be better described as a seasonal timeshare than a traditional romance. Hades also claimed fame as the original divine pet owner, with his ferocious three-headed dog Cerberus, whose bad temper and lack of obedience mostly served to keep souls within the underworld. Unlike his brothers Zeus and Poseidon, Hades neither sought out infidelity, nor threw tantrums, nor craved the limelight, which might explain why the ancient Greeks rarely constructed temples in his honor. More out of fear than neglect. He was like the solemn, brooding uncle everyone respected but preferred to keep at arm's length during celebrations. Finally, Athena, a goddess of wisdom, strategic warfare, crafts, and calculating foresight, stands out as the very embodiment of logic amid a pantheon, often governed by emotion and fury. Her birth story alone, a surreal event involving Zeus swallowing her pregnant mother Metis, would be a psychologist's head spinner. Athena's essence revolves around clear thinking, tactical brilliance, and cunning, qualities that made her indispensable in myth and classical culture alike. Zeus, of course, developed a splitting headache from the whole ordeal. Instead of reaching for aspirin, he resorted to something far more drastic: a hammer to his skull. And out popped Athena, fully grown, fully armored, and completely unimpressed with the chaos around her. From the very beginning, Athena made it clear she wasn't one for nonsense. Unlike her war-happy brother Ares, who thrived on bloody battles, Athena approached conflict like a grandmaster playing chess. Something to be studied, controlled, and won with calm precision and clever strategy, rather than loud shouting and reckless fury. If Ares was a chaotic bar fight exploding in the streets, Athena was the quiet war room, the one with the spreadsheets and battle plans meticulously mapped out. But Athena's realms didn't stop at war. She was also the goddess of crafts. That might sound like a strange combination, until you realize that weaving and craftsmanship were another kind of battlefield for her. Take the story of Arachne, a mortal who dared challenge Athena to a weaving contest. Technically, Arachne won, but her pride got her punished. Athena transformed her into a spider, condemning her to endlessly spin webs in the shadows. The lesson? Be humble, or you might find yourself stuck spinning in a forgotten corner of someone's ceiling. Unlike many gods in Olympus, Athena stayed clear of romance entirely. She didn't seduce mortals, marry her brothers, or morph into bizarre animals just to trick someone. She had more important things to do: protect cities, advise heroes, and raise owls, the symbol of wisdom that accompanied her. Athena helped guide Odysseus safely home, assisted Perseus in beheading the terrifying Medusa, and probably had a harsh red pen handy when editing the Iliad. When you needed someone on your debate team, in a war council, or running a startup, Athena was the goddess you wanted by your side. No shouting, no underhanded schemes, just consistent outsmarting of every challenge. Now, contrast that with Ares, the Greek god of war, bloodshed, and jumping into fights without a second thought. If Athena's war was a well-oiled machine, Ares' approach was more like a sledgehammer crashing through a glass factory. He embodied the raw, brutal chaos of battle, the part where soldiers screamed, clashed blindly, and all anyone noticed was the chaos, the smoke, and someone losing their helmet in the fray. Personality-wise, Ares wasn't exactly the favorite on Olympus. Even fellow gods kept their distance. Zeus himself called him the most hateful of all the gods. And when Zeus calls you a problem, you've definitely got issues. Ares was arrogant, impulsive, and as subtle as a flaming chariot barreling downhill. The Greeks highly valued cunning, restraint, and strategy, virtues that Ares seemed to dismiss entirely. No battle plans or clever tactics here. He simply charged in swinging, and while this approach sometimes worked, more often it resulted in unnecessary carnage and exasperated allies. Still, Ares was a terrifying force. He was literally the god of fear. His sons were Phobos and Deimos, whose names meant panic and terror, perfect companions for a god who thrived amid blood-soaked chaos. He loved the heat of battle, the roar of war, and the adrenaline rush of violence. He even had an affair with Aphrodite, but romance quickly turned embarrassing. Caught in an invisible net by her husband Hephaestus, Ares was publicly humiliated and laughed at by the entire pantheon, a scandal that ancient Greek tabloids gleefully reported. When Roman mythology absorbed him, Ares got a makeover as Mars, more disciplined, more honorable, and far less chaotic. But in Greece, he was the embodiment of war's wild, terrible side. The storm that tears through orderly plans and leaves chaos in its wake. He remained the embodiment of chaotic, brute force violence. But Ares wasn't without his moments of respect. During times of real warfare, he was both feared and revered. Warriors made sacrifices to him, hoping for strength, or at the very least for his wrath to overlook them for some time. When he wasn't in the midst of destruction, he commanded a striking chariot pulled by fire-breathing horses, which definitely earned him some undeniable style points. Aphrodite, on the other hand, was the goddess of love, beauty, desire, and those messy, passionate romances with surprisingly high casualty rates. If you've ever seen someone fall head over heels way too quickly for the absolutely wrong person, congratulations, you've witnessed Aphrodite's divine influence firsthand. There are two tales about her origin, each with its own level of dramatic trauma. One version claims she is the daughter of Zeus and Dione. The older, much stranger story says she was born from the sea foam that formed when Cronus severed Uranus's godly parts, tossing them into the ocean. Seriously, that's arguably the least romantic origin ever bestowed on the goddess of love. Aphrodite's beauty was so dazzling that both mortals and gods lost their ability to make sound decisions in her presence. She possessed a magical belt, called the cestus, that made her utterly irresistible to anyone, which, let's be honest, is a pretty unfair advantage in any love game. Despite embodying desire itself, Aphrodite's personal love life was complicated. She was wed to Hephaestus, the diligent god of fire and blacksmithing. Yet she notoriously favored the company of Ares, the god of war, which reveals quite a bit about what kind of men she preferred. Their affair came to light when Hephaestus cunningly trapped them mid-romp in a golden net and called the other gods over to witness the scandal. Classic ancient Greece, where revenge and public shaming were the ultimate methods of conflict resolution. But Aphrodite wasn't just about chaos and infidelity. She had a tender side too. She aided young lovers, presided over weddings, and infused the world with beauty. She was the goddess petitioned before confessing crushes or attempting to sweet-talk one's way out of trouble. Still, she wasn't above instigating wars herself. After all, it was she who promised Helen of Troy to Paris, setting off the infamous Trojan War. Why? Because she wanted to win a divine beauty contest. Yes, really. An entire civilization was set ablaze because Aphrodite coveted a golden apple inscribed with, "To the fairest." She is the patron goddess of desire, not of stability. Beautiful, intoxicating, and utterly dismissive of your relationship boundaries. Meanwhile, Hephaestus stood apart from the other Olympians as the god of fire, metalwork, craftsmanship, and arguably the only divine figure with an honest job. While other gods busied themselves starting wars, chasing mortals, or tossing lightning bolts like confetti, Hephaestus stayed in his workshop, forging weapons, constructing palaces, and muttering complaints under his breath. His origin story shifts depending on the source, but none are flattering. One version paints him as born deformed, and Hera, repulsed by his appearance, hurled him off Mount Olympus, an exile that set the tone for much of his life. Unwanted luggage isn't the only thing falling from the sky. Sometimes gods do too. Take the story of Theseus, who, after a bitter family quarrel, gets tossed out of heaven by Zeus himself. The fall is harsh. He lands hard, ending up with a permanent limp and probably enough abandonment issues to rival the weight of Mount Crete. But despite this rough beginning, Theseus doesn't just sulk. He makes his way back to Olympus not through forgiveness or pleading, but by wielding clever leverage. He creates a magical golden throne for Haia, a gift that cleverly turns into a trap. When Haia is caught by the throne, the gods of Olympus plead for Theseus' help in freeing her. He agrees, but only on his terms. He demands re-entry into their divine ranks. His negotiation, sharp and effective, seals the deal. Back on Mount Olympus, Theseus transforms into the divine handyman everyone depends on. He's the master craftsman behind Zeus's thunderbolts, Poseidon's trident, Achilles' armor, and just about every enchanted item there is. If it glows, soars through the air, or packs a punch, you can bet Theseus forged it, often burning the midnight oil without a paycheck. Yet, despite all his talent, he's consistently disrespected. His wife, Aphrodite, the woman he picked, famously cheats on him with Ares. His family, let's say they keep their distance emotionally. His colleagues, constantly breaking the very gear he's just repaired. Unlike Ares with his brute anger or Haia with her cunning plans, Theseus takes a different approach. His revenge is quietly brilliant, a blend of creativity, elegance, and passive aggressiveness. The net he crafted to trap Aphrodite and Ares during their affair? A masterpiece designed for maximum public embarrassment, both practical and poetic. Theseus isn't flashy or glamorous. He doesn't dazzle or sparkle. Yet, he is the god who literally built Olympus. An unsung hero, the patron deity of blacksmiths, artisans, inventors, and anyone who's ever screamed at a machine before fixing it with nothing but duct tape and sheer frustration. Then there's Hermes, the god of travelers, commerce, thieves, messaging, and fast-talking mischief. Picture the guy with winged sandals and a staff that seems more ornamental than functional, buzzing with an energy that screams, "I've already eaten 3 olives, and lied twice today." Hermes hit the ground running, literally, from birth. On his very first day, he crawled out of his crib, stole Apollo's cattle, invented the lyre using a tortoise shell, and snuck back into bed, all without anyone noticing. While other gods might take centuries to cause such chaos, Hermes managed it in under 6 hours. Though commonly known as the messenger of the gods, Hermes' role is far more dynamic. He wasn't just the divine postman. He smuggled souls to the underworld, guided heroes through enemy lines, and probably pioneered some form of celestial express shipping. Always 2 steps ahead of trouble, he left behind nothing but a charming grin and a suspiciously vague alibi. Hermes also served as the god of commerce and trade, likely because nothing inspires confidence in a marketplace quite like the same deity who also oversees theft. He embodies negotiation, persuasion, and morally flexible entrepreneurship. In essence, he's the patron saint of salesmen, travelers, pickpockets, and anyone who's ever bartered fiercely at a flea market. But Hermes was more than just a charming rogue. He showed loyalty when it mattered most. He helped Odysseus outwit Circe and gave aid to Perseus. Let's dive into the fascinating world of Hermes and Demeter, two Olympian gods whose stories are as rich and complex as they are captivating. Hermes, known as the messenger god, was no ordinary divine figure. He wasn't just the wing-footed trickster who handed Perseus the tools needed to behead Medusa. He was also a surprisingly tender guide for souls journeying to the underworld. Beneath all his mischief, Hermes carried out his responsibilities with a seriousness that caught many off guard. One of Hermes' most iconic accessories was the caduceus, a winged staff entwined by two snakes. Interestingly, this symbol is often confused with the medical emblem, which is ironic considering Hermes' real domains: speed, cunning deceit, and expertly navigating boundaries others wouldn't dare cross. Imagining the hierarchy of Olympus as a corporate entity, Hermes would be that overcaffeinated specialist. He'd solve your toughest problems faster than you could say Zeus's thunderbolt, vanish without a trace, and probably be caught later optimizing cloud functions, perhaps after borrowing Zeus's wallet for a quick snack. Fast, clever, unpredictable, and utterly charming, Hermes embodied the archetype of the god who gets things done, slips away before questions arise, and leaves everyone admiring his audacity. On the opposite end of the emotional spectrum stands Demeter, goddess of the harvest, agriculture, grain, and the very force that breathes life into the world, when she's in the mood, that is. When Demeter was pleased, crops thrived, trees burst with fruit, and the earth blossomed with abundance. But when displeased, well, famine reigned, winter's chill set in, and despair blanketed the lands. Unlike other Olympians who might wield thunderbolts or spark wars, Demeter's power was subtler, but no less formidable. Her influence was silent yet absolute. She could halt the entire planet's food supply with nothing more than a bad mood. This particular aspect of her nature was proven true in one of mythology's most poignant tales involving her beloved daughter, Persephone, a true flower child of Olympus. One day, as Persephone was gathering flowers and enjoying the beauty of the earth, the ground suddenly split open. From the depths emerged Hades, the god of the underworld, and admittedly, a professional kidnapper by mythological standards. He abducted Persephone, sending Demeter into a divine frenzy. In her grief, Demeter roamed the earth, refusing to let a single seed sprout until her daughter was returned. Crops withered, animals starved, and humans pleaded for mercy. Demeter was resolute. No Persephone meant no produce. The crisis escalated so severely that Zeus himself stepped in, mainly because humans were dying and sacrifices to the gods were dwindling. A deal was brokered. Persephone would spend part of the year with Hades, and the remainder with Demeter. This arrangement is the origin of the seasons. Spring and summer mark Demeter's happiness in her daughter's presence, while fall and winter reflect her sorrowful absence. Thus, one of the most vital natural cycles in human history stems from Demeter's emotional fluctuations, a powerful, almost maternal form of environmental control. This blend of grief and negotiation illustrates mythology at its dramatic finest. Beyond her emotional depth, Demeter was also known for her strong sense of justice and the critical role she played in shaping civilization. She taught humans how to cultivate wheat and build societies, but not without enforcing strict rituals and respect. The consequences of interruptions could be severe, as in the tale where a king and queen faced a harsh punishment for disrespecting her sacred rites. Demeter straddles the line between nurturing life-giver and formidable earth witch. At her core, she represents resilience, maternal devotion, and the sacred bond between mother and child, embodying the profound cycles of life and death, tied to the very soil of the world. Meanwhile, Dionysus ruled domains that might seem wildly divergent, but are deeply intertwined. The god of wine, revelry, fertility, theater, madness, and the impulsive decisions one makes after a few too many drinks. His stories add a vibrant, unpredictable energy to the tapestry of Olympus. But that's a tale for another time. Imagine Dionysus, the living embodiment of you only live once, draped in ivy, a bit tipsy, and possibly in the middle of summoning a panther. His entrance into the world was nothing short of dramatic. Born from Zeus and a mortal woman named Semele. His story starts with divine intrigue and mortal tragedy. When Hera, ever the vigilant and jealous wife, discovered Semele's affair with Zeus, she cunningly tricked Semele into demanding that Zeus reveal his true godly form. The result? Semele was incinerated by his divine presence. But Zeus, refusing to let the unborn Dionysus perish, stitched him into his own thigh, carrying him to term in a manner only Greek mythology could conceive. Yes, a thigh pregnancy. As Dionysus grew, he wandered the earth, spreading the art of winemaking, restless joy, and a touch of existential unease. His entourage was a lively crew of satyrs, maenads, and other wild woodland companions, a traveling carnival of ecstasy and occasional chaos. His followers didn't just celebrate wine and merriment. Their rituals were about shedding identity, dropping inhibitions, and sometimes even clothes. Dionysian festivals were wild, immersive spectacles filled with masks, passionate theater, and decisions made under the moonlight that might seem questionable in hindsight. Imagine Burning Man, but with actual divine stakes. Yet Dionysus wasn't just the god of revelry and fermented happiness. He had a famously theatrical temper. Often him by mocking his worship or interrupting his vibe, and consequences followed, often dramatic. One king outlawed the Dionysian cult and was driven mad, ultimately dismembered by his own people. Another was transformed into a dolphin. Dionysus' punishments were never subtle. They made statements. But alongside this fiery nature, Dionysus was deeply compassionate, especially toward society's outcasts and misfits. He offered comfort to the broken and gave voice to those silenced by society. Occasionally, he'd even transform people into vines, a symbol ripe with meaning. Dionysus perfectly embodies the paradox of divine freedom and chaos, mixing joy and destruction, artistry and madness. He is the deity who grants creativity one moment and has you barefoot, dancing wildly in a vineyard the next, leaving you to question the very choices that led you there. Now, step into the realm of Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, wilderness, wild animals, and the moon. She's famously the goddess of no, never feeling the need to explain herself. And trust me, that's a warning, not an invitation. Typically, portrayed with a bow in one hand and an unyielding resolve in the other, Artemis stands apart among the Olympians. She doesn't rely on thunderbolts or love potions. Her arsenal is precision, discipline, and an entourage of divine wolves. As Apollo's twin sister, Artemis's arrival was nothing short of impressive. She helped deliver Apollo right after being born herself. From then on, she was done with men, swearing off marriage, romance, and anything remotely resembling emotional vulnerability. Instead, she embraced the wild, roaming forests, hunting stags, and leading a loyal band of maiden followers who shared her fierce love for nature and total disdain for drama. Artemis is famous for her purity, but not in a delicate, Victorian way. Think more along the lines of touch me and I just might turn you into a deer. Take the story of Actaeon, a hunter who accidentally glimpsed her bathing. Instead of calmly setting boundaries, Artemis made a clear example. He was transformed, highlighting her zero-tolerance attitude and her fierce protection of her autonomy and sacred privacy. Artemis once transformed a man into a stag and unleashed her own hunting dogs on him, tearing him apart. A clear message of her fierce justice. She was fiercely protective, especially when it came to women and children. Unlike many Olympian gods who treated mortals like mere pawns in a game or options in a dating app, Artemis stood as a divine shield for the vulnerable. Anyone who disrespected the sacredness of nature or harmed the innocent faced her swift, poetic, and often fatal vengeance. As the goddess of the moon, Artemis embodied calm, clarity, and mystery. She illuminated the night, guiding travelers safely through darkness, both literally and metaphorically. While her brother Apollo represented the sun's blinding brilliance, Artemis was the moon's cold, focused gaze, less warmth, more watchfulness. She wasn't flashy, but she didn't need to be. Artemis carried an undeniable presence. No one dared challenge her or try to flirt with her. They simply hoped she wasn't aiming her bow in their direction. In today's terms, Artemis would be the original independent woman. Fierce, free, and completely indifferent to others' opinions. She didn't dwell on Mount Olympus. She ran wild in the woods, embracing her untamed nature. Apollo, Artemis' twin brother, was the god of the sun, music, prophecy, healing, poetry, archery. Essentially, he claimed every job on Mount Olympus. If the gods had LinkedIn, Apollo's profile would crash the site. As the radiant poster child of Olympus, Apollo was all golden hair, golden lyre, and a golden chariot that carried the sun across the sky every day, responsible for daylight itself. No pressure if you were running late. But beneath Apollo's dazzling exterior lay a complex web of emotions. He was dramatic and deeply sensitive. Picture him singing heartfelt ballads after a breakup, then cursing the one who rejected him, literally. Take the story of Daphne, for example. She transformed into a tree just to escape his pursuit. Apollo mourned her loss, but then turned her into a sacred symbol and wore her leaves as his crown. Because, apparently, that's the healthy way to cope. Apollo was also the god of prophecy, meaning he often knew tragedies were unavoidable yet still reacted with anguish when they happened. That's classic overachiever energy. He established the Oracle of Delphi, where priestesses, inspired by divine madness, delivered cryptic poetic riddles supposedly revealing everyone's fate. Talk about user-friendly guidance. His love life was complicated. Apollo chased many mortals, faced constant rejection, and often responded with dramatic, poetic overkill. When a Spartan prince named Hyacinthus tragically died during a discus game, possibly caused by Apollo's own mishandled throw, the god was so grief-stricken, he transformed the boy into a flower. Sweet, if you can overlook the blunt force trauma. Despite his intensity, Apollo was also a healer. His son, Asclepius, became the god of medicine, and Apollo himself could both cure plagues and unleash them, depending on how offended he felt that day. In short, Apollo was brilliance wrapped in insecurity, power etched in poetry, charm blended with a fiery temper. The kind of god who'd write you a love song one moment and shoot you with an arrow the next. Imagine this. If you didn't clap, you might just get hit by an arrow. That's a quirky way to start a story about Hestia, the goddess of the hearth, home, and domestic peace. In ancient Greek terms, she's basically the only Olympian who never triggered international incidents every week. Hestia was the eldest child of Cronus and Rhea, and uniquely, she was also the first to be swallowed whole by her rather paranoid dad. But here's the kicker. When Zeus finally overthrew Cronus, Hestia was the last to be spit back out, making her both the oldest and youngest Olympian at the same time. Greek mythology really plays fast and loose with logic, like a funhouse mirror reflecting reality in strange ways. While her siblings thrived on chaos, battling for power, cursing others, seducing mortals, or throwing shade, Hestia chose a different path. Peace. She stayed out of the family drama completely. Offered a throne on Mount Olympus? She politely declined and gave it up to Dionysus. Why? Because she preferred tending to the eternal flame rather than getting dragged into endless disputes. That's some queen-level behavior right there. Hestia's domain was the hearth, the heart of every home, temple, and city. Wherever there was a flame burning for warmth, cooking, or rituals, her spirit was present. Unlike many Olympians, there were no grand temples built in her honor, no scandalous stories about her escapades, just a steady, calming presence that held the world together behind the scenes. She was the original essential background character. Beyond that, she was the goddess of hospitality. In ancient times, when shelter and food meant life itself, she symbolized the sacred duty to care for guests. Invoking her ensured your fire stayed lit, your bread didn't burn, and ideally, your relatives didn't overstay their welcome. And unlike other gods who loved punishing mortals by turning them into animals or objects, Hestia didn't bother with revenge. She found power in calm and order. A well-swept floor and inner peace were all she needed. Thanks to her, every meal started and ended with an offering. Every city maintained a flame in her honor at its core, and somewhere in every prayer circle, someone probably whispered a heartfelt, "Thank you for not being a handful." If we imagined the gods as a dysfunctional office, Zeus would be the overbearing CEO, Athena the overqualified strategist, Dionysus the HR nightmare, and Hestia, she'd be the serene office manager, keeping the coffee warm and the lights on while everyone else argued over whose temple caught fire next. Hestia is a reminder that there's incredible strength in stillness, immense value in simplicity, and sometimes the most crucial person is the one who quietly holds everything together without making a fuss. Now, let's talk about Persephone, one of the most fascinating figures in Greek mythology. She's a goddess with dual personalities, embedded deeply into the seasons themselves. She embodies both the bloom of spring and the chill of death, representing life and decay, wearing a flower crown one moment and an iron throne the next. She's the daughter of Dita, the goddess of the harvest, placing her firmly in the realm of life and fertility. But then, as often happens in Greek myths, things took a turn. Hades, the lord of the underworld, spotted her picking flowers, and somehow decided she'd make good wife material. Without so much as a coffee date, he abducted her straight into the underworld. Naturally, Dita was devastated by the loss. She searched the earth desperately for her daughter, but when no one revealed Persephone's fate, Dita shut down all agriculture entirely, ending harvests and leaving fields barren in her sorrow. The consequence was devastating. A global famine gripped the land, and an angry mob of starving mortals rose in unrest. At last, Zeus stepped in, not driven by fatherly concern, but because the people had stopped making sacrifices due to their starvation. A compromise was struck. Persephone was allowed to return to Earth, so long as she hadn't eaten anything while in the underworld. But, of course, she had 6 pomegranate seeds, just enough to legally bind her to a part-time presence in the realm of the dead. Thus, her dual existence began. Half the year she dwelled on Earth with Demeter, her mother, bringing forth spring and summer. The other half she spent with Hades in the underworld, ushering in fall and winter. In essence, the ancient Greeks crafted the mythic origin of seasonal cycles, and with it, perhaps a metaphor for the onset of seasonal depression. But things get far more intriguing beyond this surface story. Over time, Persephone embraced her role as queen of the dead. She transformed from a sorrowful, kidnapped maiden into a ruler who was calm, resolute, and quietly powerful. Mortals began to petition her not just out of fear, but for mercy, safe passage, and guidance toward understanding the delicate balance between life and death. Persephone embodied transformation, not merely the changing seasons, but emotional growth. She represented the shift from innocence to strength, from being seized to seizing control. Persephone is the goddess of duality. She moves with grace among both blooming flowers and cold bones. She's the reason flowers burst into life, and the reason they inevitably fade. Before Psyche even understood what the word goddess meant, she was being compared to one. By the time she reached adulthood, statues of Aphrodite gathered dust as crowds journeyed miles just to glimpse this mortal girl's face. Her beauty transcended mere admiration. It was worship. Entire gatherings treated her as though Aphrodite herself had been reborn in flesh and blood. Whispers spread that she must be divine, that no mortal woman's beauty could be so perfect by chance. Yet for Psyche, this adoration felt hollow. She wandered through cities and villages like a ghost, adored, yet unreachable. Celebrated, yet utterly alone. No one dared approach her with genuine affection. Men gazed at her as at a living masterpiece, flawless, silent, untouchable. Even her family, despite their pride, became uneasy, while her two sisters married noble men, began families, and lived warm, grounded lives that Psyche longed for. No suitor dared court a girl rumored to rival Aphrodite herself. Herein lay the peril. The gods do not take kindly to competition, especially Aphrodite. Watching her temples fall silent as mortals laid garlands at the feet of a mere human girl, the goddess burned with divine fury. To Aphrodite, Psyche was not a beautiful child, but an insult carved into flesh. Yet Psyche remained unaware of the threat looming over her. Her days were spent wandering gardens in solitude, speaking to no one. She had never felt a lover's touch or heard whispered vows in the dark. Her beauty had become a curse, creating an impenetrable distance between her and what she truly yearned for, a soul who could see her beyond her face. At dusk, she would stand by her window, watching the horizon darken, silently contemplating whether her fate was to be admired by all but held by none. No priest, no oracle, no stranger. No one ever offered an answer, until one day, someone finally did. But it wasn't a man. It wasn't a priest. And it definitely wasn't a mortal. It was a goddess. And she wasn't offering love. She demanded revenge. On Mount Olympus, beauty was more than surface. It was power. And no one wielded that power like Aphrodite, goddess of desire, seduction, and divine charm. Yet lately, her temples had fallen silent. Her statues stood lonely under the burning sun. Why? Because mortals had started to kneel before a human girl. Psyche, as if she were the new goddess of love. To Aphrodite, this was more than offensive. It was outright treason. From her place on Olympus, envy twisted her heart into a bitter hatred. She who had destroyed kings for less could not let a mortal girl steal her worshippers. Nor could she bear to see such an insult to divine beauty walk the earth. So, as only a goddess could, Aphrodite summoned her son, Eros. But Eros wasn't like the sweet god of tender love poets adored. No, he was a god of chaos. He ignited passion where there should be none, causing kings to fall for swindlers, queens to desire slaves, and enemies to become lovers. His arrows asked for no permission. They shattered reason, loyalty, even entire empires. Aphrodite's command was simple and cruel. Make Psyche fall in love with the ugliest, most monstrous creature on earth. Something foul and loathsome, below even worms. Let her experience the sting of mockery in love. Eros, obedient son that he was, took up his bow, quiver full of divine arrows, and slipped into the mortal realm beneath the moon's gentle light. He found Psyche asleep in her chamber, the candlelight flickering over her delicate features like liquid silver. She was breathtaking, too beautiful, and even a god who had pierced countless hearts felt his own skip a beat. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't part of the plan. Yet still, he reached for his arrow. But distracted by her beauty, his hand slipped, and the sharp tip pricked his skin. Just a drop of divine blood. But enough. The god of love had just fallen victim to his own power. In that moment, destiny shifted. Eros would no longer be Aphrodite's weapon. He became Psyche's silent protector. Neither of them understood the price the gods would demand for such forbidden affection, and Aphrodite would not forgive betrayal. Eros vanished swiftly before Psyche could awaken, the wound on his skin still warm. He had pierced countless hearts, but never before fallen prey to his own game. Now, every beat of his heart stirred a strange longing, a need to protect her, to cherish her, to shield her from Olympus' cruel gaze. But protection demanded sacrifice. He could not reveal the truth. If Aphrodite discovered his disobedience, or worse, his love, there would be no mercy. Not for him, not for Psyche. So Eros made a quiet vow to love her in the shadows. Meanwhile, Psyche's life grew stranger by the day. No one suspected the fierce battle underway in the heavens, nor the fate weaving its delicate threads around them both. Suitors arrived, drawn by her beauty, but what was once admired began to feel like a curse. Rumors of divine retribution spread quietly through the kingdom, casting shadows over her future. Her father, overwhelmed with desperation and fear, sought guidance from Apollo's oracle. The response was harsh and unyielding. She was forbidden to marry an immortal man. Instead, her destiny would bind her to a monster, a beast so terrifying it was feared even by the gods themselves. She was to be sent to the mountain peak, dressed in bridal finery, to meet this dreadful fate. Her family wept openly. Her sisters gasped in shock. Yet Psyche stood motionless, her silence more profound than any outburst, as though the cold wind had carved her very soul into stone. This was her fate. No room for love, no room for choice, only sacrifice. Still, she consented, not through bravery, but through weary acceptance. Once revered like a goddess, yet untouched by true love, perhaps this cruel, monstrous destiny was nature's way of restoring balance. AOS watched silently from the heavens, his heart heavy with guilt. His intentions had been protective, but now the gods had woven a complex web he couldn't unravel. If he revealed himself, his mother would learn of it and wreak havoc. Yet to stand by and do nothing meant losing Psyche forever. Zoeos crafted a secret plan. He would take her to a hidden palace, a place known only to him, veiled in illusion and silence. There, he would love her not as a god, but as a shadow. He would never reveal his face, never utter his name, and most importantly, he would never disclose the truth. Because if Psyche discovered who he truly was, everything would shatter. Even the god of love feared the pain of heartbreak. The wind was gentle but unwavering as it swept Psyche away from the mountain peak. She had braced herself for jagged rocks and monstrous snarls, but instead found an eerie, gentle silence. When she opened her eyes, she was no longer standing on that bleak summit. She found herself in a meadow lush with glowing flowers, more vibrant and enchanting than any garden she had ever seen. A winding path of smooth stone guided her steps towards something breathtaking, an impossible palace, grander than anything human hands could ever build. Its pillars shimmered softly, like moonlight dancing over water. The hall seemed to whisper her name, but no sound was heard. Crossing the threshold, Psyche expected terror, but encountered serenity instead. Invisible servants attended to her needs, washing her feet, dressing her in fine robes, and preparing sumptuous meals that appeared without a soul setting the table. At night, a voice emerged from the shadows, deep, tender, and comforting, assuring her, "Do not be afraid, you are safe. This is your home." This voice belonged to her unseen husband, the very monster the oracle had prophesied. Yet there was no terrifying beast in sight, only this gentle presence, which remarkably did not frighten her. He never revealed himself, not even under the cloak of darkness. Every night, he joined her in the quiet, velvety chamber, touching her face with a delicate kindness, whispering laughter in her ear, then vanished before dawn's first light. Slowly, she found herself falling deeply in love. Love without sight, intimacy without form. Every word he spoke ignited a yearning that grew stronger. But there was one unwavering request he made. She must never try to see him. When she asked him why, her gentle question caused his voice to tremble with tension. "If you see me, I must leave you." Psyche had been told, "Forever you shall remain unknown." So she obeyed, surrendering to the mysterious command. Yet, with every passing day, the enigma deepened. How could a man so kind, so considerate, be the very monster the oracle had warned her about? Why did love need to hide its face in shadows? And why, when she softly whispered her own name, did he never respond by revealing his? Psyche told herself these questions didn't matter. She convinced herself she didn't need to know. But the human heart is naturally curious, and once doubt is planted, it refuses to stay buried, especially when family arrives unexpectedly, and even more so when sisters come, bearing words disguised as love but laced with venom. Weeks, or was it months, slipped by in the invisible palace. Time itself seemed to bend and blur within those walls. Psyche experienced peace, joy, endless luxury, and a love that felt both real and surreal. Yet hiding beneath it all was a profound isolation. No faces to see, no names to call, no truths to grasp. Just a voice in the darkness and shadows that tenderly met her lips. One morning, however, her husband's voice carried a new weight. "Zorro will come if you see them," he warned. "See who?" she asked. "Your sisters. They come from love, or so they believe, but what they bring is ruin." Her heart fractured. She missed her sisters terribly, their teasing, their warmth, even their jealous whispers. They were her final tie to the mortal world, to the girl she used to be before gods, palaces, and secretive husbands rewrote her story. "Please, let me see them." "Just once," she pleaded. OS hesitated, but could never say no to her. He relented with a stern warning. "Do not let their poison unravel our bond. They will try to sow distrust. You mustn't listen." And so, the same winds that once carried Psyche lifted her sisters to the garden gates of the invisible palace. When they laid eyes on her, shock painted their faces. She was not only alive, she was radiant, wrapped in silks finer than any queen's, her skin glowing softly like starlight. Embraces were exchanged, laughter forced, envy hidden beneath fragile smiles. "Where is your husband?" one sister asked. Psyche answered with a gentle smile. "He comes only at night. I've never seen his face." The sisters froze in disbelief. "You've never seen him?" She nodded solemnly. "He won't allow it." Another gasped. "What if he's hideous? A beast? Or worse, what if he's one of the gods, playing you for a fool?" Their words poured forth, honeyed and seemingly caring, but Psyche sensed the shadow behind them. The old sibling rivalry was alive, but twisted into something darker and sharper. Jealousy sharpened their doubts. "He keeps you hidden, blind, dependent. Is that love or imprisonment?" The seed of doubt was planted deep in Psyche's heart. The sisters, seeing it sprout, smiled with cruel satisfaction. As they departed, they kissed her cheeks softly and whispered, "Just take a lamp one night and see for yourself. If he loves you, what harm could the truth possibly do?" Psyche watched them disappear, carried away by the wind, and for the very first time since arriving in paradise, she couldn't stop trembling. Not from fear, but from a restless curiosity. Night no sleep came. Wrapped in silk sheets, her husband's arms holding her gently, his breath steady beside hers, her mind raged louder than his heartbeat, louder even than love itself. Her sister's words echoed over and over like a haunting spell. "What if he's a monster? What if he's using you? What if he's not the man you believe him to be?" She had trusted without question. She had surrendered herself entirely to a voice in the darkness. But was it love, or was it mere surrender? Quietly she slipped from the bed, her movements as soft as falling snow. Her bare feet met the cold floor, and in her hand she held a small bronze oil lamp with its wick already flickering. Her heart pounded wildly within her chest as she drew closer. Her fingers trembled as she leaned in. When the light finally illuminated his face, she gasped. Not a monster, not some disguised deity. There lay a man more beautiful than words could capture. Golden curls spread across the pillow, gentle lips curved in peaceful sleep, and on his back, delicate feathered wings, divine and folded like a well-kept secret. This was OS, the god of love, and he had chosen her. Her eyes welled with tears, not from fear, but from overwhelming guilt. He had trusted her, warned her, loved her, and yet she had harbored doubt. She leaned closer still, longing to touch his lips with hers, to whisper an apology before the fragile light faded away. But fate is cruel. A single drop of searing hot oil slipped from the lamp and fell onto his bare shoulder. He awoke with a sharp cry, filled with pain and betrayal. His wings spread wide in shock, his eyes flooded with heartbreak. "You broke your promise," he said, his voice hollow and anguished. "You trusted fear more than love." "I'm sorry," Psyche whispered, collapsing to her knees. "I just needed to know." With a step back, Eros's glow dimmed. "Now you do." And just like that, he vanished into the darkness. The palace crumbled behind him, the invisible world they shared unraveling like smoke. Psyche was left alone on a barren hillside, the lamp still warm in her hand, her heart shattered. She had glimpsed the god of love, and lost him, not to destiny, but to doubt. Barefoot and broken, Psyche wandered through a world that now seemed colder than ever. The lush gardens, the silky halls, the soothing voice that once lulled her to sleep, all gone. The sky offered no answers. The earth provided no solace. Only regret remained, weighing each step with sorrow. She called out for Os through forests, fields, rivers, even in her dreams. But no answer came. The god of love had vanished, not from Olympus, but from her life. In despair, Psyche returned to her father's home. Yet the palace that once cherished her was filled with whispers and rumors. Her sisters gloated in her misery, accusing her of marrying a demon and losing everything. No one believed her tale of gods, love, or winged husbands. So she left once more. This time, not in exile but with purpose. She would find Oz, no matter the distance, no matter the wrath she might face, even if it meant crossing into Olympus itself. But mortals cannot simply enter the heavens. So Psyche sought the only one who might light her way, the one who had begun it all. Aphrodite Yaunodi. Yes, Psyche was afraid. The goddess had every reason to despise her. Yet if Hera still loved her, if even a sliver of hope remained, Psyche was willing to face Olympus' fury to earn redemption. She found Aphrodite not in a golden temple, but in a secluded garden, surrounded by countless mirrors. There, the goddess gazed into her own reflection, as if searching for. Psyche stood before Aphrodite, the air thick with tension. The goddess's eyes didn't waver from her cold gaze. "I warned you once," Aphrodite said icily, "and yet you dared to touch what belongs to me." Psyche dropped to her knees, her voice trembling but resolute. "I love him." A cruel, mocking laugh escaped Aphrodite's lips. "Love him? You mean the son you betrayed? The god you doubted?" Psyche bowed her head in shame. "I was foolish, but I will do anything to earn back his trust." Aphrodite turned sharply, her eyes gleaming like sharp blades. "Anything?" Psyche nodded without hesitation. The goddess smiled, but it was a chilling smile, devoid of kindness. "Then you will suffer. You will be tested. And perhaps if your agony is great enough, you might become worthy of my son." Thus began a trial unlike any other. Not one of strength, but of pure devotion, and Psyche knew she would have to face it alone. Aphrodite wasted no time. Though famed for her beauty, her cruelty when provoked was equally legendary, divine in severity. Psyche's only hope of seeing Eros again was to prove her worth through a series of impossible challenges. The first task seemed deceptively simple. Aphrodite led her into a vast storage chamber where heaps of seeds spilled uncontrollably across the floor. Barley, Millet, lentils, poppy, wheat, and beans, all mixed into an overwhelming confusion. Separate every grain, every seed, Aphrodite commanded with a yawn, and sort them into their proper piles by nightfall. Fail, and you will never see my son again. Then the goddess departed, humming a carefree tune. Psyche stared at the chaotic mess before her, knowing no human hands could sort such a mountain in a single day. Still, she knelt and began, picking seed after seed with trembling fingers. Minutes dragged like hours. Her vision began to blur. She had barely made a dent in the endless seed chaos. Yet the divine realm was watching. Unseen by Psyche, a trail of ants gathered silently nearby. These weren't ordinary ants. They were sacred to Dite, goddess of the harvest. Whether moved by mercy or love, the ants sprang into action. Hundreds of tiny legs scurried, forming rivers that divided the seeds with astonishing precision. In mere minutes, where chaos had ruled, order now blossomed. Barley grouped on one side, lentils neatly stacked nearby, millet arranged into perfect pyramids. It was as if nature itself had bent time to aid her. When Aphrodite returned at dusk, she found not failure, but flawless order. Her eyes narrowed, suspiciously. "You had help," she accused. Psyche lowered her gaze. "I only did what I could." A flicker of both anger and reluctant amusement played across Aphrodite's lips. She had never expected the mortal girl to triumph, let alone with such grace. But there were countless trials still to come, each harder, each more dangerous. This was only the beginning, Aphrodite warned. If you want to see Eros again, you'll need more than just luck. Psyche, weary and aching yet standing proud, nodded firmly. "I'll do whatever it takes," she vowed, because true love was worth far more than divine favors or mortal pride. And so, Psyche's battle had only just begun. Barely catching her breath, Psyche was called once again. Aphrodite presented the second task, one even crueler in its design. "See that? You see that river down there?" the goddess asked, her finger tracing the path of a winding stream sparkling beneath the warm, golden afternoon sun. The river ran alongside a lush meadow, where wild rams grazed peacefully. But these were no ordinary rams. Their wool shimmered like pure gold. "Bring me just a tuft of their fleece," she instructed with a sly smirk, "just a handful. But please, try not to die." And just like that, she vanished, leaving Psyche standing alone with a daunting task ahead. She knew this was far from a simple errand. These were sacred golden rams, fierce and untamed. Their eyes burned bright with wildness, and sharp as spears were their horns. Legends warned that anyone who dared enter their territory without permission would be mercilessly gored, torn apart without a moment's notice. Though they glittered like treasure beneath the sun, these creatures guarded their field with a fiery rage. Undeterred, Psyche carefully climbed down the hill toward the meadow. She crouched low by the reeds, heart hammering with fear, watching the majestic rams roam. Their hooves clattered against stones, their growls rumbled deep and primal, echoing in the quiet air. The thought of crossing into their field in daylight made survival seem impossible. Overwhelmed, Psyche sank to her knees, tears brimming, fear gnawing at her resolve. Yet the world was watching still. A gentle whisper floated on the breeze through the tall grass, a soft voice, like the rustle of reeds swaying in a secret rhythm. It was the spirit of the river, an ancient presence bound to the sparkling stream. "Do not enter the field while the sun remains high," the spirit murmured. "The rams rage fiercely in the daylight, but when twilight falls, they slip into the shade and rest. Wait for that moment, and then gather the wool caught on the thorny branches nearby. No beast will miss it." Hope sparked anew inside Psyche. She waited patiently, hours passing as the golden rams one by one drifted silently toward the forest, settling down to sleep beneath the cooling sky. When darkness cloaked the meadow, Psyche moved forward softly, with the utmost care. She found tufts of golden fleece tangled harmlessly in the brambles and bark. Guided by moonlight, she gently gathered the precious wool and returned to Aphrodite. The goddess's eyes narrowed sharply as she inspected the shimmering handful in Psyche's palm. "You live again," she murmured with strange curiosity. But Psyche said nothing, not a word of pride or victory, just quiet strength forged in the fires of love, teaching her lessons even the gods had long since forgotten. Courage, she realized, need not roar. It can be soft but unbreakable. Though Aphrodite's trials were far from over, Psyche was no longer a mere victim. She was a fighter. Frustration grew in the goddess, her once mocking smile now replaced by a cold, calculating glare. Psyche had survived tasks designed to crush her spirit, relying only on unyielding determination and a peculiar, almost otherworldly luck. For her third trial, Aphrodite devised a challenge meant to end Psyche's story forever. "Bring me water," she commanded, but not just any water, from the river Styx itself. Psyche paled. The Styx was no ordinary river. It formed the boundary between the realm of the living and the shadowy underworld of the dead. Its waters were sacred, cursed, and fatal to mortal touch. Even gods approached with reverence and fear. No mortal survived its banks. None ever returned after crossing. Still, Psyche nodded silently. Her journey led her toward a sheer cliff so steep it seemed carved by mighty Titan hands. Far below, the Styx churned dark and glassy, shrouded in swirling vapors of curses, and haunted by the mournful wails of lost souls. Its current twisted endlessly. It did not flow in a simple direction, but coiled like a living serpent. The scene was nightmarish. A river twisted and writhed like a living serpent, its currents dark and foreboding. Worse still, perched menacingly along its banks were monstrous winged creatures, ancient dwellers from the depths of the underworld. These beings swooped through the air with piercing screams, their razor-sharp claws capable of ripping flesh from bone in an instant. There was no way down the cliff, no path forward, no glimmer of hope anywhere. Overwhelmed, Psyche collapsed beneath a rocky ledge, her fingers clutching the crystal vial that Aphrodite had mockingly handed to her. "Just a sip," the goddess had jeered. "Enough to show you tried." Then something began to shimmer in the air. A high-pitched hum filled the silence, and from a crack in the stone emerged a small but magnificent creature. It was an eagle, regal and massive by bird standards, its golden eyes flashing with authority. A gift from Zeus himself, the eagle of thunder and kings. Without a word, the powerful bird took the vial gently from Psyche's trembling hands, spread its great wings, and soared down the treacherous cliff face. The ancient winged monsters shrieked in fury but dared not attack, for even death bowed to Zeus's command. In moments, the eagle returned, placing the sealed vial filled with shimmering, cursed waters from the river Styx back into Psyche's hands. She didn't question why Zeus would intervene. Perhaps OS had once aided him. Perhaps even gods respected the endurance of love. When Psyche returned to Aphrodite, the goddess accepted the vial with a cold, stony silence. Psyche had passed the trial once again, but the ultimate challenge awaited, one that would lead her into a place even gods feared to tread. And as the goddess's voice grew colder than the very river Styx itself, she pronounced the final task: "You will journey to the realm of Hades. There you must beseech Queen Persephone for a box of her beauty. A gift, you see, for me. Lately I have been feeling quite worn. Your very existence exhausts me." It was a death sentence in disguise. Even the boldest mortals avoided the underworld. None who ventured into Hades' domain living ever returned. But Psyche no longer hesitated. If the path to true love lay in darkness, then darkness would not deter her. Guided by whispered hints from sympathetic voices, some say Demeter, others name invisible benevolent spirits, she discovered a hidden cave, a scar piercing the earth's surface, forgotten by time. She took with her 2 coins to pay Charon, the ferryman, and barley cakes to offer Cerberus, the three-headed hound guarding the palace gates. Each step forward stole warmth from her bones. The air hung heavy not with smoke, but with an eerie silence. The souls around her drifted like fragile memories, thin, hollow, and unreachable. At the river Acheron, Charon received her coins and ferried her silently across the still waters, stained with forgotten grief. When Cerberus appeared, snarling fiercely at the threshold of Persephone's palace, she offered him the cakes. Instantly he quieted, licking his blood-stained jaws. Inside, Queen Persephone sat serene on a throne of obsidian, her eyes gleaming like polished garnets. "You come seeking beauty," the queen remarked, her tone neither cruel nor kind. "But at what cost? I do not want it for myself," Psyche answered firmly. "I must deliver it to Aphrodite." Persephone nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps she, too, has suffered the madness of love. She then handed Psyche a small plain box, sealed and unmarked yet unbearably heavy in her hands. "Do not open this," the queen warned softly. "It is not meant for your eyes." Psyche nodded in gratitude and began her journey back, but the journey felt heavier, burdened with temptation. The box throbbed subtly in her grasp, as if alive. "Just a quick peek won't hurt," she whispered to herself, trying to dismiss the nagging unease. Yet her resolve faltered, doubt invading her mind once again. Could this mysterious beauty inside finally restore her worth in OS's eyes? Could this be the final, crucial key she needed? As she neared the surface, her heartbeat quickened, her fingers twitched nervously, and light shimmered across her face, the first sign of radiance she had worn in days. Then, unable to resist, she opened the box. Suddenly, darkness surged forth like a sinister wave and engulfed her. Instead of the expected glow and splendor, a cold, grave-like mist drifted out from the box, chilling the air. It was not radiant divine beauty, but a somber sleep. An immortal slumber of the underworld, crafted by Persephone, intended to secure her power rather than glorify Aphrodite. Psyche didn't scream or fall dramatically. Instead, her body gently collapsed onto the grass at the edge of the mortal realm. The box lay sealed beside her, as her limbs stiffened and her breath stilled. She was caught in a fragile limbo, not dead, yet not truly alive, frozen in an eternal pause, her heart stilled by the very curiosity that led her there. This could have been Psyche's tragic end, but love, as it often does, proved stronger than death. Far away, atop the heights of Olympus, OS had never forgotten her. Though his wounds had healed, his heart remained raw, tormented by visions of Psyche enduring relentless trials. Upon hearing she had descended into the underworld, he understood her sacrifice, defying Aphrodite and braving death itself, all for the sake of love. Such courage was no mortal act. She was a queen. Defying his mother's commands, OS burst forth from Olympus in a brilliant blaze of wings and golden light. Racing through the heavens, clouds parted beneath his furious wake until he found Psyche, still, silent, and pale, like a marble statue kissed by twilight. He sank to his knees beside her and wept, not with sorrow alone, but with rage, regret, and a love so profound it defied words. Tenderly he lifted the box and sealed it shut once more. Without hesitation he pressed his lips to hers, not with magic or spells, but with a kiss full of promises, memories, and desperate pleas. Slowly, her eyes fluttered open. Psyche gasped, the oppressive sleep lifting like morning mist, her trembling hands reaching out. "Eros," she whispered. "You returned," he answered softly. "I never stopped loving you." Holding her tighter than ever, their embrace spoke volumes. In that moment, the gods who had watched, some amused, others angry, finally understood. Even the god of love had found his equal. Their reunion shook Olympus to its core. OS defeat his mother's will. Psyche defied death, and together they transcended the boundaries between mortal and divine, between duty and desire. Such love was dangerous and defiant. Aphrodite, furious beyond measure, stormed into the god's court demanding justice. "This mortal," she cried, "has mocked us, broken sacred laws, and corrupted my son. She must be destroyed." Yet the gods hesitated. They had witnessed Psyche's relentless trials and suffering firsthand. In the end, Psyche showed an indomitable spirit. She persevered, refused to yield, and rose stronger than ever before. Her love had endured trials no mortal passion had survived. Yet, the final decision rested with Zeus himself. Seated on his mighty throne, holding lightning in one hand, and the threads of fate in the other, Zeus had witnessed every moment, the falls and the rises of Psyche, her moments of doubt, her unwavering devotion. Finally, he broke the silence. "True power lies in love that persists," he declared. Aphrodite began to protest, but Zeus raised a hand to quiet her. "You have tested her thoroughly, more than any mortal I have ever seen. She is worthy of Olympus. She stands as living proof that even mortals can love like the gods." Turning to Psyche and OS, Zeus asked, "Do you wish to be united forever, truly and fully?" With firm nods, they answered without hesitation. "Then, it shall be so." With a graceful flick of his hand, Zeus conjured a goblet brimming with ambrosia, the sacred drink of immortality. He offered it to Psyche. "Drink, and you will transcend mortality. Your heart will beat with eternal life. Your soul will dwell among us. Yet your trials will remain. They are the stories we all bear, the fabric of who we are." Psyche took the goblet without trembling. As the ambrosia touched her lips, warmth blossomed within, not a fire, but a gentle flourishing. Her senses expanded. Her heartbeat steadied into a deep, resonant toll that echoed across the ages. In that moment, she became divine. No longer mortal, no longer lesser. OS reached out and took her hand. Before the entire assembly of Olympus, they were declared husband and wife. This was a love story that did not end in tragedy. This time, love was crowned with glory. The transformation was profound. Psyche's skin sparkled with celestial radiance. Her eyes contained entire galaxies where once there had been tears. The gods who had mocked her mortal lineage now regarded her with awe. For the first time in Olympus's ancient history, a mortal earned her place not by blood, but through relentless devotion. She was no longer simply Psyche the girl or Psyche the beautiful. She was Psyche the immortal, goddess in her own right. Even Aphrodite, who had once cursed her, was left speechless, unable to deny what stood before her. A woman who had faced death, temptation, betrayal, and exile, yet chose love above all pride. Though Aphrodite was slow to forgive, Eros, her son but fiercely loyal husband to Psyche, stepped forward with quiet grace. "Mother," he said gently, "she is no rival to your beauty. She is something else entirely, the soul who truly understands love." In that moment, tension eased, not vanished but softened. Aphrodite's silence said more than words ever could. It was a reluctant surrender. Zeus proclaimed Psyche the goddess of the soul, her name itself meaning both spirit and breath of life. Her trials had not molded her into a flawless figure, but shaped her into the very embodiment of enduring love. Olympus celebrated with a magnificent feast. Nectar flowed like rivers, stars danced across the heavens, and even the fates smiled upon the tale they had once woven in whispers. Standing beside Os, Psyche no longer knew fear or uncertainty. She was his equal, and she was divine. Together, they walked forward, embracing their eternal love and new life among the gods. High above the mortal realm and beneath the endless skies, there existed guardians, not just of the heavens, but of love and the journey of the soul itself. From their divine union came a daughter, Hedone, the goddess of pleasure and delight, embodying pure joy. She emerged as a symbol of transformation, for where Psyche once wandered among thorns and shadows, she now danced bathed in eternal light. Not because she was flawless, but because she had loved deeply, fallen hard, suffered profoundly, and risen stronger each time. Her story is a beacon, proof that mortals, even those broken and heart-wounded, can ascend to the heights of divinity, conquering trial after trial. Thus, the tale of OS and Psyche does not conclude in sorrow or heartbreak, as many mortal love stories do, but in profound transformation. Their journey became more than myth. It evolved into an enduring truth, whispered through the ages, from temple altars to lovers' bedrooms, from ancient storytellers to modern dreamers. Love, true and real, isn't simple. It is challenged, doubted, and wounded. Yet, when it perseveres, it transcends time and becomes eternal. Psyche's path began with a curse of beauty she never sought. Admired by strangers, envied by sisters, and manipulated by gods, she faced punishment for being loved and suffered again for loving back. Yet, she never gave up. Even when her heart shattered, when her faith faltered, she pressed onward. And Aquarius, the god of love, learned alongside her that love is not a weapon or a game, nor a secret kept in shadows. It is a light that shines brightest when faced openly. Together they reminded even the Olympian gods a lesson long forgotten. Love is not reserved solely for the divine. It belongs to anyone bold enough to fight for it. Across Greece, lovers offered prayers, not only to Aphrodite but to Psyche as well. They whispered her name during marriages, childbirths, and funerals, honoring her not merely as a goddess, but as a living reminder that the soul can endure despair. That love, even when it falls, can rise anew. Regardless of how deep one's underworld may be, or how sharp the trials faced, the heart always finds its way back. Centuries later, long after temples have crumbled and mighty empires have fallen, this story persists. It lives in the very word psyche, meaning soul, in the field of psychology, the study of that soul, and in every narrative where love is tested and ultimately triumphs. OS and Psyche endure, not as cold marble statues, but as echoes whispered within each of us. Every time we choose trust over fear, forgiveness over pride, and love over silence, we step along their path. And perhaps, through these choices, we inch closer to the divine. Long before she inspired fear, before statues caught in mid-scream told her story, before serpents whispered their secrets on marble floors, Medusa was once a mortal girl, hauntingly beautiful beyond compare. Her beauty was subtle, quiet, not an arrogant proclamation but a gentle presence, like sunlight filtering softly through stone. Her hair flowed with the luster of midnight silk. Her eyes carried the calm before ocean storms. Though her demeanor was serene, her presence unsettled kings and gods alike. Medusa was born into a monstrous lineage at a time when monsters were both worshipped and feared with equal fervor. Her sisters, Steno and Uriel, were immortal and terrifying by nature. Yet Medusa was different, a mortal among immortals, unique in ways that would shift her fate forever. Medusa was unique, mortal among immortals, destined to die where they would not. Perhaps this mortality made her all the more precious. Yet, she never sought power, love, or divine favor. Instead, she chose devotion, something far rarer. As a young woman, she dedicated herself to the sacred service of Athena, the virgin goddess of wisdom, war, and restraint. Within the lofty marble temple, perched on cliffs overlooking the sea, Medusa meticulously swept floors, lit incense, and whispered prayers long before dawn. She embraced vows of chastity, purity, and silence, not out of coercion but from deep conviction. Her admiration for Athena extended beyond divinity, seeing in her an ideal of strength and untouchable grace above the turmoil of mortal hearts. With time, whispers spread among the people, suggesting that Medusa was a living embodiment of Athena herself. Worshippers would steal glances under the guise of prayer. Her serene face became a symbol, her voice scarcely heard, her existence bound tightly to her sacred duties. Yet beauty, even within the confines of a temple, was never truly safe. News of Medusa's grace traveled beyond the temple walls, reaching cities, forests, and even the realm of gods. Along with admiration came danger. On Olympus, desire often wore a divine mask, blurring the line between reverence and possession. One god in particular took notice, not the god of wisdom or restraint, but the god of seas, storms, and insatiable appetites. Although Medusa kept her vows, fate began weaving a cruel twist. Even purity could be punished in the god's realm. Soon, Medusa's sanctuary would turn into her prison. Far beneath the crashing waves and coral palaces ruled by Poseidon, the sea god wielded pride, fury, and an unquenchable hunger. He had tamed beasts, stirred storms, and taken goddesses as his own. Now his gaze fixed on a mortal, Medusa. Her beauty had reached Olympus's ears, but it was her stillness, discipline, and untouchable grace that captivated him most. She belonged to no mortal or deity. Her life pledged to devotion, distant from desire. Perhaps this was what enticed Poseidon deeply. The more she prayed, the more he watched. One evening, when the tides were high and the temple deserted, Poseidon emerged from the sea. He did not seek consent. Gods rarely ask. Rising like water creeping across marble, he entered Athena's sacred temple. Medusa, alone and unsuspecting, sensed a presence and turned to face the god shadowed in the gloom. He left his trident behind, but his hunger was unmistakable. She called out to Athena, her voice echoing unanswered in the vast temple. She tried to flee, but temples built for worship offered no escape. Beneath the unyielding stone gaze of Athena's statue, Poseidon violated what was sacred, not with seduction, but with force. When it was over, Poseidon vanished, leaving behind only salt and silence. Broken and trembling, Medusa curled beneath her goddess's image, silently awaiting justice, comfort, anything divine. But the gods are not always just, and their mercy can be as distant as their power. When Athena returned to her temple and discovered the desecration, her wrath was absolute, but it was not directed at Poseidon. Instead, her fury was aimed squarely at Medusa. Whether driven by pride, denial, or divine law, Athena held her priestess responsible for allowing the sacred temple to be defiled. It didn't matter whether she saw Medusa as complicit or merely inconvenient. The purity of her sanctuary had been shattered. And so, the goddess of wisdom passed judgment not on the god who had violated her temple, but on the mortal woman who had been violated. Even in myth, power is self-protective. Medusa, once revered as a symbol of sacred beauty, was now destined to become a warning no soul could overlook. The temple floor, still stained with seawater, bore silent witness to the crime. The incense had long since burned out, and a heavy silence filled the space. At its center, Medusa knelt in shame, her head bowed beneath the unyielding gaze of her goddess. But Athena's eyes held no pity. They blazed with fury. Her temple, a sanctuary of reason, discipline, and virgin purity, had been desecrated. Though Poseidon had defiled sacred ground, Medusa alone bore the blame. Forgiveness was impossible. Gods never apologized, and temples never forgot. The punishment Athena chose had to be symbolic and eternal. Descending from her statue's pedestal, the goddess stood over the trembling, confused priestess, who pleaded silently for the mercy she had faithfully worshipped her entire life. But mercy would not be granted. Athena's voice rang like thunder through the marble halls. "You have brought shame into my house. Let the world see what becomes of beauty that invites destruction." With a single decisive touch to Medusa's forehead, the transformation began. Her golden hair turned into writhing serpents, their hisses a cruel mimicry of whispered prayers. Her skin lost its warmth. Her gaze became a weapon. Where her eyes once held sorrow, they now contained terrible power. Anyone who met her gaze would be turned to stone. This curse was not designed for protection but for isolation, a punishment disguised as defense. Medusa cried out, no longer with a human voice. Her tears, once like salt water, dried before they could fall. Her breath went still, mirrors shattered at the sight of her reflection. Worst of all, she could no longer look upon another without destroying them. Athena did not weep or turn away. She merely watched as her once beautiful, devout priestess was transformed into something else entirely, a monster. The temple door slammed shut behind Medusa as she fled into exile. Her mournful cries echoed through the hills. No home, no temple, no sisters, no prayers, only trails of stone in her passing. From the cliffs of Olympus, Athena returned to her throne, unmoved. In the eyes of the gods, punishment need not be just or fair, only lasting. And Medusa's cursed visage would endure far beyond memory. Cast from temple and city, Medusa wandered into the wilderness alone, cursed and feared. Her every step carved a trail of stone across the land. Each unintended glance at a passerby turned vibrant life into cold, unyielding statues, the tragic testament to her eternal curse. Medusa's curse transformed her into a living nightmare. Every creature that crossed her gaze instantly petrified, frozen into lifeless marble. Birds caught mid-flight, deer hidden in thick brush. Even the smallest insects daring enough to meet her eyes, all became silent statues, trapped forever in motionless stillness. Seeking sanctuary, she fled to where no man would dare pursue, to remote lands beyond rivers and ruins, finally finding refuge on a bleak, wind-swept island at the world's edge, a place untouched by gods or mortals alike. There, she built no shelter. Why seek roof or walls when the stars themselves offered no comfort? Why trust barriers when those once sworn to protect her had become her enemies? Entering a dark cave half filled with statues, long-forgotten warriors, wild beasts, perhaps even other wanderers caught by her gaze for one fateful second, she began what would be her second existence. This life was no longer that of the priestess she had been, but of a pariah. Medusa no longer wept. Tears belonged to the girl she once was, that innocent girl who believed in justice, who offered incense to Athena, who looked for love through loyalty, was dead, crushed on the temple floor. In her place stood a different being, neither monster nor victim, but a woman sculpted by betrayal and loss. The serpents that grew from her head whispered in her dreams, not words, but instincts, warnings of trespassers, the heartbeat of approaching footsteps. They were her relentless guardians. Her eyes had become a curse, her soul a flickering memory of what once was. Alone, she carved images into the cave's stone walls, faces, hands, and the temple where she had once served. Even her sisters, memories fading, became part of the stone. Occasionally, heroes would arrive, drawn by tales of a cursed maiden or tempted by the glory of slaying a beast. They branded her evil, believing victory over her would exalt their names. None returned. These intruders gravely underestimated not only her formidable power, but also the depth of her anguish. Yet with each death, Medusa felt herself slipping further from humanity, becoming the monster the world projected onto her. Her humanity was not extinguished, but its light dimmed. The gods had already turned away. Far beyond Medusa's lonely cave, across the bustling city-states and grand temples of Greece, her name morphed. No longer spoken with sorrow, it was whispered as a warning, twisted, distorted, and reshaped. Medusa, the Gorgon. Medusa, the cursed temptress. Medusa, whose gaze transforms men into stone. Her past as a devoted priestess, A mortal girl who served the gods was buried beneath myth and legend. In its place stood a terrifying tale, a creature with serpents for hair, her eyes burning with the wrath of the underworld. The truth was erased. Poseidon's violation was omitted. Athena's harsh punishment was silenced. The gods' roles were edited out, smoothed over by priests and poets who favored perfect deities and clear-cut monsters. Children were frightened with stories of Medusa coming for them in the night if they disobeyed. Soldiers mocked her by carving her image on their shields, not to honor but to ridicule. Her face became a symbol of fear, a cautionary myth. Yet, her image spread far and wide. Artists painted her on pottery. Her twisted silhouette danced across mosaics. Her snarling visage was etched into temple walls, not in reverence, but as a weapon wielded to chill the hearts of onlookers. Medusa, cast out by the very gods herself, bore the relentless weight of their condemnation. She never asked to become a legend, or to be feared by all. All she desired was survival. Yet, in the eyes of the powerful, mere survival felt like a threat. On the mainland, whispers circulated, stories told in hushed tones by old women in mountain villages. They left offerings near caves, softly murmuring that Medusa was more than a monster. She was a protector, a guardian of women who had been wronged. These villagers did not fear her. Instead, they revered her quietly as the guardian of the oppressed. Still, these gentle voices were drowned beneath the thunderous roar of heroic myths that dominated the land. Medusa remained in hiding, unaware of how sharply divided her name had become. Monster to many, martyr to a few. But one truth remained clear to her. No matter where she fled, the hunters would not stop coming. Men clad in shining armor, wielding swords, eager to claim glory by killing her. Men who cared nothing for who she was, only what she was believed to have become. And in the shadows, a new challenger was beginning to emerge. A boy destined to grow into a man, a hero, and ultimately Medusa's final visitor. While Medusa endured exile and her legend spread like wildfire, a boy named Perseus entered the world under very different circumstances. A silence marked not by freedom, but by prophecy and imprisoned. His mother, Danae, was locked away in a bronze tower by her father, King Acreus, desperate to prevent the prophecy that her son would one day cause his death. Yet, the gods do not heed mortal barriers. Zeus visited Danae not as a lover, but as golden rain, slipping past walls and warnings unnoticed. From this divine encounter, Perseus was born. When the king discovered the child, he dared not kill a son of Zeus outright. Instead, with cold cowardice, he cast mother and infant into the sea inside a wooden chest, sentencing them to a quiet death. But the sea, governed by Poseidon, had other plans, guiding them safely to the island of Serapos. There, a fisherman found them and took them in. Raised in secrecy by his mother, Perseus learned strength, humility, and the silent arts of survival. Danae never spoke the name of Zeus to her son, keeping the god's identity a secret. Years passed, and Perseus grew into a sharp-eyed, clever, and strong young man, though never tested by fate. Then came Polyctes, the king of Serapos, who desired Danae for himself. Perseus stood bravely in his way. The king, feigning goodwill, invited Perseus to a feast where each guest was expected to bring a gift. Proud yet poor, Perseus came empty-handed. Polyctes sneered. Then, bring me the head of Medusa. Laughter erupted, meant to humiliate him. But wounded pride and ignorance of the name's true meaning drove Perseus to accept the challenge. The gods watched eagerly from above. Athena, perhaps still burdened by guilt over Medusa's fate, saw an opportunity and decided to aid the boy, not for justice, but to restore balance. Athena and Hermes appeared to Perseus in dreams, whispering guidance and gifts, winged sandals to fly, a polished shield reflective like a mirror, an adamantine sword sharp and unyielding, and the helm of Hades, a cloak of invisibility. But each gift carried a purpose. Perseus was chosen not merely to slay a monster, but to fulfill a myth that had been unfolding since the earliest days. The story begins not with Perseus, but with a solitary girl in a temple, praying fervently to gods who never answered her pleas. Perseus, on the other hand, embarked on his quest armed with sacred divine tools and burdened by the heavy demands of a king. But locating Medusa was far from straightforward. Her whereabouts had been lost over time, hidden so deeply that even the gods who cursed her had forgotten. To discover where she lay, Perseus needed insight beyond mortal means. He sought out the Grey Sisters, 3 ancient siblings who shared a single eye and a lone tooth between them. These sisters were older than gods themselves, cloaked in shadows and bitterness, dwelling in a realm suspended between light and nightmare. As Medusa's own kin, they knew her secret resting place. Perseus didn't bargain or plead. Instead, he waited patiently until the sisters passed their shared eye to another. In that moment he seized it, holding their solitary vision captive. "Tell me," he demanded, "or remain sightless forever." Though they hissed in defiance, they revealed the truth. Medusa's lair was on a distant island beyond all mortal navigation, past jagged cliffs that shattered ships into driftwood. An island barren of bird songs and starry skies, scattered with stone statues like fallen warriors. That was where Medusa waited. So Perseus took to the skies, his winged sandals cutting through the clouds, his heart thunderous, not with fear, but with eager anticipation. He imagined returning to Serapos, head in hand, victorious, proud, having humbled the tyrant Polyctus. At that time he did not question the tale he'd been told, believing Medusa a monster deserving death. Though the gods had equipped him well, they left him unprepared for the truth. Her cave was lined with the petrified corpses of men who once called themselves heroes. Her eyes were not inherently cruel, but cursed. Beneath the writhing serpents of myth still lay the visage of a woman who once brimmed with faith. As he flew over the sea, the winds howled loudly, as if trying to warn him. Yet Perseus heard only silence, a silence intimately known to the gods. For when a monster is created, the last thing anyone wants is to hear its voice. Upon landing on the eerie shores of the island, the world seemed to hold its breath. No breeze stirred, no birds sang, only statues, hundreds of them, strewn across cliffs and rocky outcrops like fallen soldiers. Their faces were twisted in terror, mouths frozen mid-scream, eyes wide with the final vision they ever beheld, Medusa herself. He stepped carefully over shattered limbs and fallen shields, sword sheathed, mirrored shield clenched tightly. Athena's counsel echoed in his mind. Never look at her directly. Use reflection. Move swiftly. Stay silent. But what she had left unspoken was the reason behind the statue's expression. Not only fear, but surprise. As if in their last breath they realized they had been mistaken. Perseus ventured deeper into the cavern, his wings folding gently behind him. The air hung heavy with damp moss, the scent of snakes, and something else entirely. Sorrow. The serpents hissed softly before he even saw her, a subdued chorus of warning and weariness. Then she emerged, not charging, not roaring, and seemingly unaware. Medusa lay asleep, coiled upon a bed of cold stone. Wrapped tightly around herself like a child seeking comfort, she lay there, her face reflected in the mirrored shield, serene yet delicate. A haunting beauty clung to her features, even though they were partially obscured beneath the sleepless tangle of venomous serpents resting atop her head. She was not the terrifying monster the legends had roared about, nor the horror depicted on ancient urns and shields. Instead, she appeared as someone abandoned and forsaken. Perseus paused, uncertainty gripping him. This was no roaring beast. She was simply a cursed woman, sleeping soundly and utterly alone. Yet, the gods had bestowed upon him a sacred mission. Memory surged, the embrace of his mother, the cruel jeers of King Polyctus, the promise of glory. Steeling himself, he lifted his sword, eyes locked on the mirrored shield. Step by deliberate step he moved closer. One snake lifted its head, alert. Medusa shifted slightly. Her eyes fluttered but remained closed. She did not cry out or resist, her breath barely audible. In that fragile moment, Perseus struck. His blade sliced through the air with divine precision, cutting silence itself. When her severed head landed in the bronze-scaled satchel, the island seemed to exhale. The curse ended, or so he believed. But a body can be slain. A story cannot be silenced. Medusa's tale was only just beginning. Perseus wasted no time. With her head secured in the enchanted bag, still potent despite death, he soared upward. His winged sandals beat strong against the clouds, yet the island's silence clung to him like a shadow. It was no triumphant silence. It was colder, heavier. The severed head pulsed faintly with power. The serpents writhed, their tongues flickering as if sensing the world beyond the satchel's confines. Her eyes remained open, unblinking, capable of turning to stone any who dared meet their gaze. Perseus refused to look. He dared not. The gods had entrusted him with a divine weapon, a trump card of celestial force. Yet as he flew over the vast ocean, a creeping unease gnawed at him. Below, creatures of shadow stirred within the waves. Though heroic to mortals, his act had shattered ancient pacts. Medusa's death had not gone unnoticed. Poseidon felt the tremor beneath the seas. Athena perceived the shift atop Olympus. The fates whispered quietly, weaving their silent warnings. Far above, a tempest gathered, dark and ominous. Still, Perseus pressed forward. His mind brimmed with what lay ahead: the return to Sarapos, the downfall of King Polyctus, the rescue of his mother, the restoration of his honor. A hero. That was the destiny the stories promised him. Yet the weight of the satchel told another tale, heavier than mere stone and scales. He recalled the mirrored shield and the face he'd glimpsed. There had been no snarling monster, no reckless attack. She had been asleep. Was she truly the monster the world feared, or a tragic warning lost in misunderstanding? Perseus shoved the doubt aside. Had not the gods guided him? But as the winds howled louder, a subtle sensation emerged from the bag. A hum, more felt than heard. It was as if the head still remembered the world, as though the soul of Medusa, cursed, betrayed, mutilated, remained watchful, alert, waiting. And though Perseus would continue to slay monsters and become a celebrated hero, her story was far from over. Perseus carved his name into the stars, but peace never followed. Nights brought restless sleep, haunted by the faint, unsettling rattle of snakes lurking beneath his bedroll. His dreams no longer celebrated victory, but instead drifted to vivid visions of a girl kneeling in a temple, desperately praying to the gods for protection. When Perseus returned to Serapos, he arrived with windswept hair, shimmering divine armor, and the legendary head tucked securely under his cloak. The people cheered wildly, unaware of the gruesome treasure hidden away, unaware of the true cost it had demanded. Yet King Polyctus was no fool. From the start, he knew the boy would not survive. His challenge was a death sentence, cruel and mockingly disguised as a dare. As Perseus strode boldly into the palace, head held high, the king's confident sneer faded into growing unease. "You brought me a gift," Polyctus taunted, clinging to fading control. Perseus simply nodded once. "A token of your request," he declared before opening the satchel. For a brief, shattering moment, Polyctus locked eyes with Medusa's haunting gaze. That fleeting second was enough. Stone spread swiftly across his skin like frost, cracking, fragile glass. His eyes froze wide with terror. His final breath, trapped behind lips, turned to cold granite. The once smug and cruel king was now nothing but a statue, silent and eternal. Chaos erupted. Screams filled the room. Couriers fled, some collapsing to their knees in shock. Perseus remained stoic, his face unreadable. His mother, Danae, rushed forward, embracing him tightly, finally free. Yet Perseus never spoke of the girl in the cave. To the onlookers, Medusa was a monstrous foe defeated, a mere obstacle overcome with divine aid. No one dared ask who she truly was. But Perseus remembered. He recalled the way her body collapsed, how her face reflected not rage but a silent plea within the mirror's reflection. Still, the story spread quickly. Songs were sung in taverns and temples alike. Perseus was hailed as the Gorgon Slayer, champion of the gods, breaker of curses. His name was etched boldly into marble, but never hers. Not once did they carve her name beside his. In his later years, at Athena's own command, Perseus placed Medusa's severed head on the goddess's shield. Her face, formerly scorned and feared, now stared outward as a weapon of divine justice. Yet that justice was never truly hers. Even in death, Medusa served a purpose. Silent, powerful, and trapped forever in stone. Perseus, the golden hero, carried her image into every battle. Every victory was claimed beneath the gaze of the woman he had slain. He was celebrated and adored, while she remained feared and forgotten. Neither could escape the roles the gods had decreed. Following Perseus' legendary triumph, Athena summoned him to Olympus, not just to honor his deed, but to reclaim what always belonged to her. It wasn't the sword, nor the winged sandals, nor the helm of Hades she sought. It was the head of Medusa itself. Without hesitation, Perseus obeyed, presenting the satchel with reverence. With practiced grace, Athena took her former priestess' severed head and fastened it to her sacred aegis. Transformed into a weapon of myth, the once radiant and innocent face of the Gorgon now snarled in frozen rage from the bronze curve of the goddess's shield. Wherever Athena marched, war followed. Enemies turned to stone at the terror it inspired. Entire cities crumbled before the wrath unleashed by the terrifying aegis. Across ancient temples and minted coinage, Medusa's visage stretched wide. Her shield transformed into both a dire warning and a proud banner. Yet, curiously, no one ever paused to ask the essential question. Why was Medusa cursed in the first place? Athena, revered goddess of wisdom, bore the face of a woman she had once condemned, not as a mere reminder or a pang of guilt, but as an emblem of divine authority, a powerful statement on the consequences when mortals dare to defy the gods. However, whispers traveled beneath the surface, murmurs suggesting a different truth. Athena was not simply reclaiming a weapon, but bestowing immortality upon Medusa. By embedding her likeness upon the formidable aegis, Athena ensured that Medusa's memory would never fade, that the girl who once wept within the sacred temple would be forever etched into the fabric of eternity, a fate where the gods themselves must reckon with the repercussions of their actions. Yet, as is often the case with gods, the reality was swallowed in layers of paradox. Athena had judged Medusa harshly for bringing shame to her temple, and now wielded that same symbol of disgrace as a trophy of power. This transformation was profound and complete. Medusa shifted identities, from a devoted priestess to a tragic victim, then to a terrifying monster, and then finally to a weapon and an iconic symbol carried into battles. But despite this metamorphosis, somewhere within the contours of her chiseled jaw and the sorrowful tilt of her petrified eyes, something still endured, a spark the world could not erase. For though her gaze turned entire armies to stone, there were always a select few who looked upon Medusa's face and saw far more than a monster. They saw a question posed to the heavens, a protest carved in stone, a solemn warning etched deep into the collective memory. This, they realized, was a power far surpassing any sword or spear. Now, Medusa's unblinking face gazes outward from Athena's aegis, eternal and unyielding. To most, it remains a terrifying emblem of divine wrath, a visage that petrifies foes and seals victories with a single glance. But to the discerning eye, that gaze reveals layers beyond fury. It embodies memory, injustice, and truths that no holy scripture dared inscribe. Through endless centuries, countless warriors have marched behind that shield, oblivious to the origins of the fearsome face they brandished, once belonging to a woman who never lifted hand in violence. Medusa's curse, cruelly bestowed by the gods, morphed into a tool sustaining empire and conquest. The weaponization of her suffering was complete, yet her eyes never ceased to watch. Her voice silenced, her unyielding gaze bore silent witness to 1,000 battles. She observed kings ascend and tumble, witnessed temples crumble, and saw heroes turn cold and ruthless. She heard altars raised in honor of men who branded her a monster, and listened closely to secret prayers murmured by women who understood her losses. Sometimes, these women left offerings, small clay serpents abandoned at hidden shrines, a lock of hair gently wrapped in cloth, whispered names cloaked in darkness, not out of fear, but as acts of remembrance. Long before Medusa became a mere cautionary tale, she was a protector. Her secluded cave became a grim graveyard for would-be conquerors, a sanctuary where no man dared enter and survive. It was a place where the hunted transformed into the untouchable. Over time, her story fragmented. To some, she lingered as the dreaded Gorgon. To others, she blossomed into something far more profound. A symbol of resistance, a goddess embodying wrath and wounded justice, a spirit guarding the powerless against predatory threats. Though her myth twisted and evolved like all legends do, its core remained intact, a testament to a woman whose legacy no longer belonged to the gods alone, but to those who remember her true story. Imagine a woman wronged, shaped by profound pain, whose story had been stolen from her, yet whose gaze remained unyielding and unshakable. This woman's stare endured through the ages, immortalized across paintings, sculptures, shields, coins, and even the fabric of dreams. With every retelling of her tale, new listeners paused and pondered, asking, was she truly the monster? In that very question, Medusa lived a new show. Centuries rolled by. Empires rose and fell. New gods claimed dominion, and then departed. But Medusa endured, not as flesh and blood, but as a powerful symbol and a lingering shadow. Her face, immortalized in marble and cast in bronze, traveled through cultures far and wide, from Byzantium to Rome and in forgotten corners of the world. Her image hovered just beneath the surface of myth and memory. Yet, as time wore on, something remarkable occurred. The story began to diverge. In one version, she remained the feared monster, the Gorgon with serpent hair, a killer whose deadly glare turned men to stone. Her severed head became a protective emblem, displayed above doorways, on gates, and emblazoned upon armor. Warriors carried her image into battle, hoping her terrifying legend would instill terror deeper than any weapon. But alongside this tale, quietly and persistently, another narrative took shape. It was a story whispered by poets, philosophers, and especially by women whose voices often remained absent from official records. This version portrayed Medusa not as a fearsome beast to be slain, but as a woman deeply wronged, punished harshly for her beauty, and cursed unjustly for a crime inflicted upon her. This whispered narrative did not roar. It breathed softly, asking difficult questions. Why would a goddess of wisdom punish her own servant so cruelly? Why did the sea god escape consequences? Why did so many men seek Medusa's death, when all she yearned for was peace and solitude? These questions blossomed quietly, in taverns, libraries, and the secret corners of ancient temples, like resilient weeds breaking through cracks in marble. Gradually, Medusa's image began to transform once more. She became a mirror, reflecting truth rather than terror. Women began to see themselves in her story, survivors of violence, victims silenced, souls branded as monsters for being feared. Her serpents were no longer marks of punishment, but became a proud crown. Her eyes, instead of curses, became shields forged from betrayal. Even today, in modern stories and art, Medusa rises again, not to petrify, but to bear witness. She gazes out from paintings, filled with grief, anger, and fierce determination. Her story is retold not to glorify Perseus, but to challenge why he is hailed as a hero at all. Myths evolve, and sometimes the true monster is not the one with fangs, but the one wielding the sword. And with every generation brave enough to question the old narrative, Medusa blinks once, watching as they begin to understand her true legacy.